Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and it is our second night of pre-conference keynotes for the Homeschool Plus conference, which is in its second year. And returning to talk with us is Jamie McMillin. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I've really been looking forward to hearing from you. The Homeschool Plus conference has received sponsorship support from Homeschool Life and G3. We thank them. The Learning Revolution Project is a series of virtual events. We have about a dozen conferences now that are held throughout the year on a variety of learning topics. We're also running a virtual film festival. We just had our first director's interview with Herman Doing, who's the director of The Forbidden Education, and it worked. We used the Google Hangout on Air and just finished that up seconds ago, and what a delight that was. And if you haven't seen that film, 2.5 solid hours of very good thinking about education, and well worth the time. And thanks, as always, to Blackboard Collaborate for this terrific and stable platform. Those of you who are in the live audience now have a chance to tell us where you're participating from. You also have a chance throughout the session tonight to ask questions, and I will watch them and look for them and introduce them to Jamie if she doesn't see them. Look to the left of the map. You're looking for the star icon. You're going to double-click on that and then click on the map. And you can put in the chat, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and it is 8 p.m. We have Massachusetts. I think there are 2 of us in Asheville, if Amy's in Asheville now. British Columbia. And Jamie's in Oregon. Okay, so now you know how to use the chat. Please feel free to keep doing so. I'm going to move us forward here, Jamie, and I will be here for the duration. And so if I can help you in any way, let me know.
Oh, okay. All right, well, hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be part of this again this year. Thanks to Steve and all the volunteers for helping to put this together. So as you heard, my name is Jamie McMillin. I homeschooled my 3 kids for about 15 years. And I want you to know that in all that time, I did try a lot of methods, and I read tons of books. And I do understand what it feels like to worry and wonder if I'm doing everything right. Over time, I came to truly appreciate the value of self-directed education, or unschooling, as you might be more familiar with that term. But as you probably know, turning education over to our kids is a very scary thing. It takes a huge leap of faith and trust that everything will work out. Let's see, I'm going to move the slide forward here. Oh, there it goes. So the problem is that we as parents might have this image of what cool things our kids could be doing with all that free time. We've heard about what other kids are doing, starting their own businesses, volunteering, filling up their sketchbooks or raising honeybees, whatever. But it seems like our kids are spending an alarming amount of time playing video games or watching YouTube videos or surfing Reddit. So is this normal? Is this what they will do for the rest of their lives? Now, let me just say that I really don't have anything against video games or computer time. I spend plenty of time on Pinterest myself. These things are fun and they're good. They're nice and relaxing. The real issue is we just want to see our kids create or do something of their own, too. We want them to show initiative. Psychologists have a fancy word for this. Self-directed executive functionality. How about that? It means being able to do things without having someone else tell you to do it. And it is surprising how many people have trouble with this. It takes effort and imagination. It takes guts to go out and try something that someone else hasn't already set up for you. For our purposes as parents, it means that our kids will get up and try things. We hope they'll be positive things, but that's not always the case. Thomas Edison was particularly well known for his initiative. Even as a kid, he was always asking questions, taking things apart, coming up with new ideas. He once had an idea that maybe birds could fly because they ate worms. But he wasn't about to eat worms himself, so he convinced a neighbor girl to do it instead. Now that showed initiative. He got in big trouble for it, but it was his idea. There are lots of reasons why people might do what they do. So you can see them. This is just some of the ones I was trying to come up with, some motivators. Looking at this list, you can pick out the ones that we're really hoping to develop. I put those in green. The others here will always be there, and that's okay. But for all of us, it's more satisfying to live a life directed by curiosity, excitement, concern, love, our own personality type, than it is to be ruled by money or social pressure or laziness. We don't want to be motivated by that. So what do you notice about all of the motivations listed in green? They're very personal. We're not all curious about the same things. We don't love the same people. We have different personalities. These motivations come from the inside. This is the basis of initiative. Not external motivation, but internal. You've heard this before, I'm sure. So how do you encourage internal motivation? There are two big influences that I want to talk about here. We'll look at those in more detail in the upcoming slides. The first is modeling, because our kids have to know what initiative looks like, whether from adults in their lives or from a favorite book or movie character. They can't learn it if they never see it. The second is freedom, the freedom to make choices about how to spend their time and the freedom to try goofy things that don't always work. So your kids are watching you all the time. You know this, right? Whether you're a parent or a teacher, your kids are always watching, even when they seem to be paying no attention to you. So what are they seeing? They'll notice your positive attitude about work. They'll notice your enthusiasm to try new things. They'll notice how well you take care of business, or don't. Some of you are thinking that this is no problem because you're already a superachiever. But I want to warn you that this could be even more of a problem. If you are a superachiever, and you know who you are, it is very tempting to take on your child as a project. Your child becomes your next achievement, and you can't help but coax and prod them into doing impressive things, or to do the things that you never got a chance to do. This might work. It might actually work in terms of achievement, but it doesn't really allow your children to develop their own initiative, to do the things they might have done if you hadn't pulled their strings. There have been quite a few very successful people in history who had interfering, controlling mothers, such as Franklin D. Roosevelt, General MacArthur, Frank Lloyd Wright, and that's just to name a few. Frank Lloyd Wright's mother had decided he would be an architect before he was even born. She even hung pictures of famous buildings in his nursery. So obviously it is possible to push your kids into successful careers, but these men were not necessarily successful in their personal lives, and they always resented their mother's interference. It's just a caution. I'm not saying you should never share your ideas. Just please don't channel your own ambitions through your offspring. I'm sure no one here would ever do that. Another rich source of modeling is stories. So kids definitely need real-life examples of adults trying and doing things. But stories are great too because they can be very personal. Every child has their own favorite storybooks and favorite characters that they really identify with. When I was little, I loved the Little House on the Prairie books. And even today, I remember how impressed I was with the way the Ingalls family built their own houses, grew and stored their own food, and survived the locust bears and long winters. It was amazing, right? If you've ever read them, I highly recommend it. It made a huge impression on me. So can you think of any stories that have made an impression on you or your children? I strongly urge you to give it a try. Read aloud every day to your little ones, and don't hesitate to read aloud to older kids as well. Help your kids find books that they will connect with. Even movies, video games, and TV shows can provide role models. It's okay. It doesn't have to be a book. You never know which story will resonate the most and spark a new interest. The other big influence on initiative is freedom. Many times when a parent complains about a child not having any initiative, what they really mean is that the child won't do what the parent wants her to do. What the parent really wants is obedience, but they'd rather have the child take the initiative to be obedient, rather than pestering and bribing and punishing the child to do what the parent wants. This is not the same thing as true initiative. Kids have to have the chance to choose things, even if the parent doesn't always approve of those choices. And as the child gets older, they will need more and more opportunities to decide for themselves. Young people naturally want to move in the direction of independence, but if the adults in their lives are intent on running their lives, the only option left is outright rebellion. This doesn't mean that the kids get to have everything their way, though. You are a person too, and have just as much right to respect and consideration as the kids. Your kids will thrive on the freedom to make choices with their time and energy, but they do also need boundaries. Everybody needs boundaries because it makes us feel safe, just like having guardrails on a winding mountain road. Absolute freedom would be very unsettling. If you ever had it, it would be unsettling. So the best way to think about boundaries is to think about how our behavior does or doesn't affect other people. How my kids dress, their hobbies, the condition of their room, their favorite books, their studies, those things really don't affect me. I might have opinions, but they truly don't affect me. However, other things, such as playing music too loud or leaving a mess in the kitchen or not telling me where they're going, those things do affect me, because we live together in the same house, and I would be scared if I didn't know where they were. So the places where our spheres intersect are the appropriate places to set boundaries for both of us. This is where we decide on rules for common courtesy and consideration. The rest of the spheres should be open to personal expression. I'll give you a second to read that. It's a long one. Unstructured time. There was a study recently published in the Frontiers in Psychology journal online. You can search for it and read the whole thing if you want to. This study, the researchers tried to determine if the amount of structured activity in a child's day made a difference in the way that that child learned to initiate goal-directed behavior. Another word for initiative. They used various control methods and testing to measure this. Now, structured activities were things generally led by an adult, such as school, sports, and various organized meetings with a leader. Less structured activities included watching movies, playing video games, playing alone or with friends, and doing chores. They found that the more time children spent in less structured activities, the better they became at directing themselves. The researchers do emphasize that these results are preliminary and more research needs to be done, but the study certainly does support what we have already guessed from observation, that kids learn to direct their time by actually doing it. If kids become accustomed to always being told what to do next, then that is what they will wait for. They're not thinking, what will I do next? They're thinking, what do I have to do next? If the child chooses to take a class or join a sport, that's fine, but it's very important to avoid overscheduling them. Give them the gift of time. It'll really pay off. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but forming good habits for mundane activities can actually create more opportunity for higher order tasks. So just like when you first learn to drive a car, it takes all of your mental energy to manage the wheel, step on the right pedals, and be aware of your surroundings all at the same time. But with practice, it becomes easier as your subconscious takes over. You still have to be alert, but you don't have to think about how to turn the wheel or flip the turn signal. That's the great thing about habits, because your subconscious takes over some of those things for you. So good habits like cleaning up after yourself, brushing your teeth, communicating well with others, it can make the rest of your life so much easier. Same for your kids. If they have good habits for taking care of the little things, the foundation is already there for bigger things to come along later. and they won't have to put so much effort into all the little mundane things. Now, how do you put all the modeling and freedom to work in your homeschooling life? Obviously, self-directed education is a huge advantage. Give your students plenty of time and free rein to choose how, what, and when they will study. But it's okay to decide on some boundaries together. One example I really like comes from Montessori classrooms. The teachers here give the students large blocks of time and the freedom to decide what to work on during that time. But the kids are also taught that they must put away one thing before pulling out another. In preschools, they often have hands-on type of activities arranged on trays on shelves. So the kids have to put one tray away before working on the next things. They have to clean up after themselves. This is common courtesy and keeps the classroom harmonious. So you see, it is freedom mixed with responsibility. Now back to the video games. I really don't think video games and other media are a bad thing for older kids, but they are habit forming. I would recommend limiting media for kids under 7 or 8 so they have a chance to develop more naturally and don't form those habits at such an early age. But as they get older, they will be able to spend more time with media and keep it in perspective. They may love video games, but if you stick with this mixture of modeling and freedom, I truly believe that most kids cannot resist the urge to limit themselves. My boys spent many engaging hours building Minecraft worlds, Little Big Planet games, but after a while they would get tired and want to go outside or write a story or bake a cheesecake. I admit that I did worry about excessive video gaming when my boys were teens, but as young adults, they do regulate themselves. So is anyone here wondering about this? So this was my second worst fear. Is anyone here wondering what the worst fear of unschoolers could be? What would you say is the worst fear of an unschooler? Just write it in the chat box here. No one? No one's going to be brave enough? Well, I'll just tell you, oh, college. Okay, great. Yeah, don't learn what's necessary. That's great. Yep, that was pretty much my guess. I think the worst fear for all of us is that being brave. Oh, that's really interesting. I was always worried that I was going to completely ruin my kids. Yeah, there you go. Parent doesn't feel confident. I was worried that they wouldn't get an adequate education, and then I would not be able to move on to college or whatever else they wanted to do in life. So yes, that was the #1 fear, I thought, for unschoolers. So thank you for taking my little mini poll here. But for that fear, the #1 fear, I did cover that in my presentation from last year. So if you're interested, you can certainly go check out the archives for the 2013 Homeschool Conference. You can also learn more details about how well self-directed learning really does work by checking out my book, Legendary Learning, which is available online. You can also learn more about it on my blog, which I'm not very good about keeping up to date, but I have posted a ton of good articles over the years. Also, if you're a Mac user and want to try keeping your homeschool records on your computer, you might want to check out my software, OLLY. So I put the website on the screen there. That's it. Now, does anyone have any questions for me? About anything. It doesn't have to be about initiative.
Jamie, it might be worth a 2-minute description for you to tell people what Legendary Learning is about.
Oh, sure. Well, I undertook this project because, as I said before, I read so many books about homeschooling that, because I'm a reader and a researcher, I really wanted to know the answers. But as you might have noticed, there's books that range from complete unschooling to classical homeschooling, and lots of other methods like Charlotte Mason and Montessori, and there really didn't seem to be one definitive answer. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go look for my own answer. I wanted to researched famous homeschoolers, people who had definitely had an alternative education, but then went on to lead very successful lives. I was just curious, so how were they raised? What did they do? I thought maybe I could learn what their parents did to help them learn. And it was interesting. I found this list of all the famous homeschoolers that someone had come up with, and I read a bunch of books, and I took notes, and I found some very interesting similarities between all of them. And I'll give it away right here. The biggest similarity is that most of these people were self-taught for the most part. They had some other habits and influences on their early childhood, so I put it all together in this book. If
One
you're
of the
interested.
lessons that I remember loving from the book was that they all were able to stop doing something that they didn't stay interested in. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, they were. Several of them were very rebellious. You know, the parents would try to encourage them to do one thing. Well, off the top of my head right now, Alexander Graham Bell, his father really wanted him to have a classical education and learn Latin and Greek and get into the appropriate schools, but Alexander wasn't interested in that. He was only interested in science, particularly sound, and he was able to negotiate with his dad a reprieve from the Latin just so he could go study sound and elocution. And of course, it all, you know, we know where that led. And there was other examples too of some very feisty people who were able to buck the expectations other people had for them and go on to do what they really wanted to do.
And we've got a couple of questions that I'll read in just a second. One other lesson I thought was so interesting, I hope I'm remembering it correctly, was time outdoors.
Oh yeah, yes, that was a big one. Every child I had read about spent an enormous amount of time outside, and it could just be it was a different world back then. But I think it does set a good example for kids now. If our kids today spend as much time outside as those kids 100 years ago did, I think it would be a different place. And again, it's not to put down video games, but it does take away from the time getting to know nature and just spending time outdoors with yourself. Ursula Le Guin, I think, or was it? I hope it's her. She had written that she developed her soul, as she put it, just walking the hills outside while she was a teenager. Just all that empty time to walk and think and be alone was really important for her.
Okay, so Liz asks if you can talk about the transition to unschooling for a learner who has been subjected to traditional school for several years, that is a teenager.
Okay, well, and I'm guessing from the wording there, subjected, that the teenager is willing to be unschooled, or is the teenager anxious to be homeschooled or not? That makes a big difference.
And she says sure.
Let's see, is that Liz?
I think she's saying yes.
Sure. Yes. Okay, he's well. Oh, well, that's perfect then. That's easy. I think the hard thing, if you've got a teenager who's really jaded towards regular education and suspicious of authority, they often need a bit of cooling off time. Let's see, well, the people, different homeschoolers have called that different things. They have different words for it, but pretty much just a decompression time, and just leave them completely alone to get it all out of their system. And different kids might need different amounts of time. And I think they might test to see, are you really serious about this? Are you really serious that you're going to let us direct our own education, or do nothing, or play video games? They might test that to see if you're serious. That's okay. You can just leave them alone. As I said, you can still have boundaries for the typical things with living together in the same household and just common courtesy, but hands off the education until they're ready to talk to you about it. I do think it's important for parents to still be there as advisors and to assist their students get the resources they need, because there's always, if they can be enrolled in classes or outside activities or finding mentors, once they've had a chance to really decide, I want to do this, or I want to try this, they're going to need your help to make that happen. They might need your help to drive them places. They might need help getting books or other resources, or if they want to sign up for online schooling. So do make yourself available to them, but just make sure they realize that you're not going to push anything on them. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Allison is asking sort of a follow-up question, which I think makes sense to answer now, but Heidi, I promise we'll get back to your question, and then Piyush has a question as well. So Allison wants to know, can you talk about both situations, meaning what about a student who is not sort of willingly going into it?
Well, my personal feeling is that if the child does not want to be homeschooled, then they shouldn't be, because it's really about self-directed education, and even if that means they have chosen to go to school, that's their decision. They want to go to school if they feel like that's where they belong. Now, of course, I don't know the circumstances, if there's other fears or worries about the school itself not being a good environment. That might make things more complicated. But I do think that if the school is basically a safe place for kids to be, then if they want to be there, they should be given that chance. My youngest daughter wanted to go to high school in 9th grade, so she homeschooled all the way up through 8th grade by choice, and then in 9th grade she just really wanted to check out high school because there was a charter school for the arts in our neighborhood, and she really wanted to be involved with the art. So it worked out perfect. She loves going to school, and that's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all. Or you could have a
child like our last child who says, I don't want any of that crazy homeschool stuff you did with the other kids. I'm going to regular school. Yeah. Well, and I think really some kids like to have that organization. They like the structure. They like to be told what to do. And if that works for them, then that's fine. Although we do have lots of supportive long talks about the fact that we're supporting her what she wants to do, and then really, reading the same books that she's reading, trying to treat it like a joint experience, a learning experience. You have a question from Heidi, who says, how can we get youth to study subjects that they have no real interest in, but we as parents feel are necessary?
Okay, that's definitely a good one. So I admit, that I did put a little bit of influence on my kids, but here's how we did it. This is great. I read Oliver DeMille's book on Thomas Jefferson education, and I know he's one of the keynote speakers, and I really loved that book. It made a big influence on me. So one of the ideas in there was to sit down with your kids at the beginning of the school year and just brainstorm a list. It's still up to them. Brainstorm a list of things that they're interested in, curious about, feel like they need to study. But the other thing that we did once my kids were getting into, junior high age is they both knew they wanted to go to college. So we looked at college websites, and I acted as academic advisor. So we looked at what do colleges expect. For incoming freshmen, what would they want on your application? Do they want SAT scores? Do they want certain classes? And these college websites are very specific usually about what they expect. They'll want to see, 2 years of foreign language, or they want to make sure you've had chemistry, or they want to have a certain number of years of lab-based science. And so these things are right there on the website in black and white. So if you're child has any interest at all in going to college or think they don't know, but maybe, then they're generally old enough to realize that this is the time they would have to get ready. Even if they're not interested, and math is a big one. For kids who don't like math, it's kind of hard to convince them to take algebra or algebra 2 even. Unless they see it there, there's this gauntlet, there's this gateway that they have to pass if they want to move on in society. And that's just one of the rules that society has put in place. And it's not our rule, it's somebody else's rule. And they don't have to do it. So my boys, we would sit and we'd look at the college requirements and we'd make up a list, and it did tend to match the typical high school schedule. However, I didn't push them or bully them into doing it. I let them decide, and we tried to pick out the most unoffensive curriculum possible for that subject. And they got involved with that planning, and they both had different learning styles, so of course they used different materials based on that. And even now, my oldest was particularly resistant to math. He didn't like it at all, but he did ask me to push him because he knew that he wouldn't do it on his own. He asked me to please keep on him about it. So he knew that about himself. He knew that that was a weakness of his, and he was perfectly happy to have me do that, but I wouldn't have otherwise. And I never pushed my other son at all. He did it all himself. And it is important for things like that to be involved with the grading and to help them make sure they're doing it right. So if you're not able to do that, I would really encourage you to enlist an online school or classroom or enroll them outside. Sometimes that helps to have some outside teacher. They'd much rather do the work to impress somebody else than to try to impress you, as particularly teenagers. I think it helps to have outside validation wherever possible. But it's, and community college is great for that. I didn't feel like I had the energy to do chemistry or physics. I did do biology at home, but I didn't want to do those other lab sciences. So we signed the boys up for community college classes at that point. And it was vigorous. It was a vigorous schedule, but I was amazed at how well they pitched in. They worked so hard on those classes. And because it was really their first time in a classroom, I think they tried even harder. They excelled in these classes. And even though they had never sat in lectures before, they did it all. They managed their homework, they managed their schedule. So don't try to do everything yourself. I recommend bringing in as much from the outside as you can. But the nice thing is that you can be eclectic and just cherry pick what you really want and what works best for your kids.
So Piyush is from India, and I'm not sure I'm even saying her name correctly, but she asked a couple of questions about the role of traditional school and homeschooling. She wants to start her daughter in homeschooling, but she's wondering if it's better for her to have school for a couple of years, and about the value of the peer working, teamwork, caring and sharing that she says, that I'm assuming she's saying would come from a school experience.
Okay, I see. Well, it's interesting. I would actually think I would turn it backwards. I would recommend homeschooling earlier when they're young, because it's still really important to get your kids outside the house and hook up with other families and groups. Play groups are wonderful. There's lots and lots of opportunities to get your kids with other people. But I think particularly young kids, they need to have more time to be a child. And one of the problems, I think, with going to school too early is that it snuffs that out. If you look at the natural progression of child development, I think they're much more able to handle formal schooling once they're older. And this changes, everybody's a little bit different. All the kids will grow up and develop at different ages. So your kids better than anybody. if they really want to go to school, if they're excited about that, then go ahead and let them try. But just be prepared to bring them back home if it seems like it's really crushing their spirit. Some schools, I think, are fabulous for this. If you can find an alternative school that lets your kids be kids for longer, lets them play more, gives them more free time, I think that would be worth looking into. But from my experience, most traditional schools push schoolwork way too early, and it ends up squashing the natural impulse to learn. And I wouldn't worry about developing all those social skills at school. I think they can easily learn all that at home, particularly if there's more than one child in the home. They have to learn about teamwork and sharing just from having brothers and sisters. Let's see, does that answer your question? Oh, better to... Okay, I think I got that. Better to start homeschooling from class 1. Yeah, I would recommend keeping them at home when they're younger. And then, unless they just want to give it a try. My oldest did want to try first grade because he really wanted to ride the school bus. So he went to first grade for a couple of months and then decided it wasn't any fun. And then he came back to homeschooling.
Piyush asked a technical question. She was interested in whether or not the software was only Mac.
Yes, it's only Mac or iPad. There's plenty of other computer-based record-keeping programs for Windows already and online. You know, if you want to do an online type record keeping, there's several of those, but OLLY's only for Mac, sorry.
So if you have a question for Jamie, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand, and we'll give you the microphone. That's the hand icon, the third one over in the participant window. Maria's asking, can you give advice on work-study for teens, especially in the STEM areas?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, my second son is a computer programmer now, and his work study was really building OLLY. He started that years ago, and OLLY is what helps pay for his college right now. He's going to be a senior at the University of Washington this next year, and this summer he's an intern at Facebook, which is pretty cool. He's very excited about that. As far as teenagers go, I think it would be helpful to look in your, you can look in your local high school to see what programs are available. I would say definitely do a search in your local community. You just never know who might be looking for an intern. And you can use the word intern when you're approaching different companies. It helps if you know people. Just start talking to everybody you know and say, hey, my son or daughter would be interested in doing some work study or apprenticing, and just see if anybody knows anything. Schools might have some good leads. If you have a local community college, they would have some good leads. I do think it's really great for teenagers to get outside the house and find mentors, because they're the prime age for that. They're ready to impress somebody else besides mom and dad. Does that answer your question? Let's see, I'm trying to manage my scroll box here. Oh, that was for Maria. Okay. How do you get schools and community colleges to help non-affiliated people? In my experience, the schools are really, if they're not students. It could be different in different communities, but my schools have been very friendly towards me. I think most understand that they're looking out for the best interests of the the population as a whole. I mean, they really care about students. And I think if you're friendly and not condescending and just genuinely interested in what's available and smile, I really don't think that they'll mind you asking for these resources. And of course, also other homeschooling parents in the community might be aware of some resources and science museums. I think just start diving in, looking around everywhere you can, and other people will give you ideas too, like, oh, have you ever tried so-and-so or such and such? You definitely, well, and that's why your kids need you, because you're better able to find these things for them in some cases than they are. Of course, they should be looking too, but they need your help whenever possible. Oh, and as far as that the question for, could you suggest any other software for the homeschooling? Unfortunately, I can't think of any of them right off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. But if you did a Google search for, if you're looking for record-keeping software for homeschooling, just put that in the search bar, and I'm sure you'll come up with a lot. And also, there's a homeschool review sites that can give you some good ideas.
Again, feel free to put a note in the chat or raise your virtual hand. Jamie, is there another book in you?
You know, there is. I need to, I have another day job right now, so I'm trying to, I don't know how I'm going to free up the time, but I have some ideas.
You're not going to tease us?
Well, yeah, I'm almost afraid to mention it, but well, there's several ideas, but the one that has to do with homeschooling is I'm actually interested in writing a curriculum for peak oil. You know, I'm interested in the whole future, ecotechnic future that we can expect as energy becomes more expensive, and I think it will change the kinds of things that our kids and our grandkids will need to learn about in the future. It's going to be a whole new world that we haven't experienced yet, and I think it would be interesting to predict the types of things we need to know about and learn.
Eco-gardening kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, well there's going to be a big emphasis on recycling. It's going to be in many ways kind of like World War II, where people had to learn how to reuse and recycle for real, and there's going to be a lot of careers, I think, available for people who know how to fix things and remake things and repurpose things, and urban mining and urban gardening. I mean, there's a lot to it, and I think it's fascinating. I would really love to start researching it. This is my thing, is I love to research, and so whenever I get this impulse to research everything I can, that's when I think, oh, maybe I could write a book on that.
Okay, Liz wants to know if you're familiar with any teachers in traditional schools who use unschooling ideas.
When you say traditional schools, I'm assuming you mean public schools, and I really don't think they're able to anymore. Maybe in the past, but the amount of control over schools these days and over teachers, I don't think they have any room at all for variation or experimentation. So I think the best bet would be maybe charter schools or private schools. I think Waldorf and Montessori, and I know there's quite a few smaller alternative schools out there that try different things, try unschooling ideas. So those are worth looking into. The problem, I guess, is paying for them. So charter schools might be a good solution, or sometimes homeschool co-ops will get together and hire teachers, hire a space. I mean, there's a lot of options out there, but I really don't expect public schools to adopt any of those ideas anytime soon.
Heidi wants to know if, when you're required to report to a local charter about your homeschooling, do you have any tips?
Sure. Well, I think I love the idea of keeping journals, taking pictures, keeping book lists. Anything you can do to maybe make a grid of your week. And I know with unschooling, you don't always plan ahead necessarily. A lot of it is recording learning after it's happened, which is fine, and it fits in really well with journaling. But you can also have a simple grid, and it's different grades and ages. I guess for younger ages, it's easy to have a more informal looking presentation. And then as your kids get older, you might want to take more detailed notes, because if they do need to go to college, you're going to want to come up with a transcript for them. And so I would recommend for college-bound kids, I do recommend getting some of those books available on how to do record keeping for college, because it is important, and it is up to you as the homeschooling parent to come up with a good package to help them get into college. It's not impossible, it's not scary, you can do it, but this is beyond what I can tell you here. Now for younger kids though, I think school administrators are happy just to see that you are keeping lots of records, you're doing things, you can show them pictures, maybe make a scrapbook page. And of course some schools will have some very specific requirements, like they want to know how many hours a day you've studied. Definitely check with your local regulations for your state and your county. So you do have to give them what they want, but that's fine. It's really, I think they've got their hands full just keeping up with their own requirements for the kids in school. And they do have to keep tabs just to make sure you're moving along doing things, but it's not that scary, especially now. Homeschooling is mainstream enough that you don't have to worry about some of the things that we did back in the 90s.
So Maria is asking about what communities in general have you found to be helpful for you as a self-directed learning leader? And I think she's giving the example of the maker movement as being a community that is helpful in that way.
Oh yeah, I love the maker movement. It's interesting that you say a self-directed learning leader. I feel kind of sheepish because I don't know if I have participated as much as a leader. I spend a lot of time writing on my computer, and I have been to some unschooling conferences, and of course there's this online conference, but I've been to some in person as well, and those are always fun to meet people. I guess while I was homeschooling, I did always get involved with the local homeschool groups, and I tended to get involved with the local museums because we went to the museums a lot. My kids always like to go visit and learn things in nature centers, so that tended to be where I did the most as a homeschooling parent. I don't know if that helps you much, Maria. I'm sorry.
Maria, we're just about to announce a Maker Education virtual conference, which we're going to do, I think, in January or February. And we do have we just did our first Future of Museums conference and have a Future of Libraries conference that runs each year. Jamie, you probably don't know this, but part of what I'm trying to do is to bring those learning conversations together from the different sort of siloed arenas, because I think there's so many of them are similar, just like the homeschooling learning conversations are actually so similar to a lot of the conversations that educators are having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really are. Well, the digital age has really changed things. We are so connected now in ways that we couldn't in the 90s or even 10 years ago. There's so much available to us now. And then we probably will start crossing some barriers and working together more. But I do think for the public school world, they have to ease off on some of those regulations. I think the teachers would love to be more creative and would love to implement more unschooling type ideas. They're just not allowed to. So some of it's politics, I guess, and we have to convince the larger community that these ideas have value and that they actually work. So maybe as we get more unschooling graduates out there, they can help hold themselves up as examples of, hey, this isn't so bad, we should give it a try.
Okay, we're just about at closing time. Liz wants a reminder for downloading the slideshow. You go up to File, Save, and you save it a whiteboard. And just be sure to use the drop-down to save it as a PDF file rather than in its native form, which you will not be able to open anywhere other than Blackboard Collaborate. So it's File, Save, Whiteboard, and then you're saving it as a PDF. Okay, final call for questions. So Allison is asking Liz a question. Jeremy, I think we're done. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, you're welcome. This was really fun.
Really appreciate it and appreciate your work. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We are in our second day of pre-conference keynotes. We have one more day. We did our first Alternative Education Film Festival interview tonight. The recording is up on the YouTube channel. Go to altedfilmfest.com to learn more. That was with Herman Doyne of the film La Educación Prohibida, or The Forbidden Education. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. This is fun.